Let's be honest. We've had a revolution. We've had a coup d'etat. Right-wing terrorists have taken over the country and the government, thus legitimizing themselves, which is what happens when terrorists are successful. The language changes. Yesterday's terrorists are today's government leaders. They used many tactics, some old, some modern, some unprecedented, but very successful, including intimidating the country and breaking its will for 8 years. So let's talk about revolution, overthrows, coup d'etat, why they succeed and why they fail. Hypothetically, of course, theoretically. Be it far from me to advocate violent revolution, even though we've just had one. For the time being, we still have supposed free speech, so we should exercise it while we can. You might ask, where are the left-wing terrorists? Why isn't the left armed and organized? The left must find causes that bring it all together to fight against. What is our Vietnam? We know who our Nixon is. The left, the opposition, must see the big picture and not allow itself to split off into separate agendas until the big picture is accomplished. You will see attempts by the Democrats eager to be reelected, eager to keep their pockets filled, continuing moving towards the middle, moving towards the right, trying to cooperate, curry favor with the new administration. Do not trust them. Their agenda is the same. Increased military spending, increased lobbying, increased tax breaks for big business, increased war, which will only benefit them as much as it will benefit the Republicans. When you have nobody on your side, what side do you turn to? There are those that say delusionally, now that Trump is elected, he won't have to follow through on the harsh, uncompromising rhetoric of his campaign and rallies. Why not? With a majority in the House and Senate and a stacked Supreme Court and a manufactured mandate from the now dominant right-wing media, what's to stop him? The elements to overthrow a dictator or fascist totalitarian authoritarian leader rests on a few components of the modern state apparatus. One element is a fully developed permanent standing military. No surprises there. Another is the professional bureaucracy. That might seem like a surprise. The modern bureaucracy has full access to all the information needed to be disseminated, manipulated, or suppressed to accomplish its goals, whatever they may be. Further, this permanent bureaucracy is quite separate from the totalitarian leader. They operate quite outside the confines of the autocrat's rule, laboring anonymously but carrying great weight collectively. That's why Trump is committed to destroying it. Trump has already attempted once to drain this swamp, but failed. It's not that easy, even for a dictator, because without the foundation of the bureaucracy, the state collapses. Historically, the military and the professional bureaucracy have worked together to commit a palace coup, an inside job. These are often successful because they draw their power from unseen, underestimated forces like bureaucrats and office workers, not just soldiers. That is why Trump wants to drain the swamp and replace it with mindlessly loyal lackeys who will do his bidding. Easier said than done. The bureaucracy has created myriad ways to protect its existence. If Trump is successful in sweeping out the autonomous bureaucracy that is not beholden to him and replace them with flunkies, it will take away one of the key components of any potential coup d'etat. Because we are so ethnically and politically diverse, this becomes a daunting task. As far as the military, we know there is a disproportionate population of loyalists operating within the armed forces, but we don't really know what percentage do not fit into that category. In both cases, The bureaucracy and the military in this country are vast enough that there are independent pockets that are either unpredictable or can't be controlled. Because both the military and the bureaucracy are rigid systems, they behave predictably. This can help the dictator control the actions of those two systems, but also leaves open the possibility of disruption from within those systems. The chaos of the coup can exploit the rigidity of the bureaucracy during the coup itself, and then rely on the rigidity of the bureaucracy to make the coup sustain. Of course, a well-disciplined and practiced bureaucracy and military may go about their business and inadvertently resist any sort of radical change in a place like the United States, where those two entities have been rather consistent over long periods of time. Our bureaucracy and military are so vast that it is truly impossible to know beforehand what level of discipline, rigidity, potential proclivity, or propensity for chaos and change actually exist within them. The military, if its philosophy falls somewhere between the people and the government and is cogent enough, and the leadership feels they know better than either, can engineer a coup itself. We see this a lot in African nations, perhaps most famously in Thomas Sankawa's democratically driven coup in Burkina Faso, which eventually led to his assassination. Because of the implications of military rule here, it seems it would be less popularly accepted. A question we must ask ourselves is, are we interested in changing out the leadership or changing the entire system? Civil war is no longer a binary system, so there are no longer two sides vying for the same goal. Today's civil war is a fragmented affair with multifaceted, not necessarily related aims or agendas, and thus with no real end ever in sight. As the sides change and align and divide, you have a perpetual war where a deposed leader or system actually has a chance to regain power. Almost like a basketball playoff round robin. You could lose a game and still win the tournament. A more modern and realistic version of the Civil War scenario is the setting up of a new state within the larger state. Perhaps you've heard of the state of Jefferson, consisting of Northern California and Southern Oregon, or North Vietnam, or Kurdistan in Iraq, Pakistan from India. There have been many. These are splinter states which carve out their own borders and declare themselves a separate state or country from the main state or country they reside within. In the end, the most successful coups come from within the government, when an essential, but perhaps even small group of the government is able to wrestle control away from the main government. But that main government must be weak enough, or vulnerable enough, or unprepared enough for such an action. And in America, that is rarely the case. Popular movements seem a less likely scenario these days. The Arab Spring was a good example. A revolution happened, except for the last phase in which change is actually instituted. It was in that moment of hesitation that the military stepped in and quelled the rebellion. This also relates to the urban revolution, where if it becomes successful, it boxes itself in with nowhere to go, essentially cornering itself. America does not lend itself easily to an outside coup. Say Mexico decided to invade Washington, or Russia decided to invade Washington. They would likely fail. Now maybe aliens would succeed. Instead, we have a confluence of outside influences trying to imbalance the system and make it more vulnerable to overthrow by a group friendly to an outside government. In this country, until a sizable majority believe the government is illegitimate, the chances of a successful, long-term, sustained revolution is negligible. The best recent example is January 6th. Yes, many people felt the election was stolen. Yes, they felt the Biden administration was illegitimate. But the vast majority of people didn't, and order was quickly restored. Now we've had an election in which a majority have voted for the coup leader. They were able to seize power through the means provided them by the Constitution, thus rendering the need for violent revolution void. These same people who supported the January 6th revolution used their constitutional right to change things and exercised it. A bloodless coup. And any attempt to overthrow will likely be repelled because of that. There will have to be outrageous, egregious breaches of freedom for a sizable enough group to engineer anything resembling a successful coup. These people, who decried the corruption and illegitimacy of the system, wound up believing in it and living by it, and now have used it as prescribed to regain power. What we will more likely see in this country, whether Republicans or Democrats are in charge, are outbreaks. Violent perhaps, but short-lived, isolated, and quickly suppressed. The government's reaction, even if overwrought and out of proportion, will probably not generate enough mass response to elevate it to coup-threatening status. We are an unusual country. We have the veneer of stability, but below it lies chaos. We are the wealthiest nation in the world, yet we have amongst the highest rates of disease, illiteracy, death rates, hunger, and poverty amongst wealthy industrialized nations. Because of defunding and deprioritizing education, we have a semi-literate class, those who could read words but lack the comprehension to truly understand them or the levels that they speak on. So they are more susceptible to what they are told, and without a frame of reference, more likely to believe it. They may even suspect it, but after all, what choice do they have but to obey or cooperate or believe? And they retreat to the safety of the tribe or the clan. We keep being told about infrastructure. But what is infrastructure? Oh well, repair the bridges and roads that have already broken down because we didn't maintain them properly in the first place. We'll fix the broken road or highway that should have been fixed a long time ago so you can continue to use fossil fuels to get across them. Vote for that bill. Does the border wall count as infrastructure? What if you don't want your taxes used for that? Too fucking bad. Who pays for the lifestyles of the ruling elite? We do. We have agitators on the right, and they have succeeded in taking power. But where are the agitators on the left? People died in the George Floyd protests, but ironically, it was an excuse for the police to kill without controversy even more black people. The protesters only destroyed property, which we know is more valuable than minority life in this country. And we no longer know or can tell who is actually agitating. Are the protests organic, or are they instigated by outside agitators? We have forgotten about the George Floyd protests because the media has chosen to focus on January 6th, and there too, we have only gotten a sensationalistic, simplistic, superficial perspective, not the truth or the whole story. And we saw on January 6th a vast majority white rebellion that the police, also a white majority, were placed in the precarious position of flee, fight, or join. And on some level, the government has made sure that we are all semi-literate in some form. How many of us understand taxes, how they are calculated or spent? Yet taxes are how the government ensures that everything you think you own is in truth owned by them. What's the test of this? If you own a house and don't pay your taxes, what happens? The expression industrialized nation is about to become as antiquated as industrialization itself. It is no longer relevant to how our economy works, and we will never return to that form of economy. We are in a postmodern, dystopic, techno-feudal economy with a whole new set of rules. Or perhaps no rules at all. I have been examining and reading about coups and overthrows and revolutions, and I recommend it. In a sense, the right wing had a successful one. The left wing has no agitators, no organization, no unifying principles, and the majority of middle-class white people are content with the status quo. So the chance of radical change seems remote. We will survive. I've survived 2 terms of Nixon, Reagan, and Bush. And in retrospect, Clinton, Obama, and the Democrats betrayed the leftist ideals when they were in power. So what sort of world will be left? And what of the billions that have it worse? That's a global problem that always has been with us, is with us, and will always be with us. But can there ever be a global revolution? The Democrats have exploited these underdeveloped but resource-rich nations just like the Republicans in our name. The CIA, our military, the oil companies are all deeply embedded in third world nations. It's a sign of how okay the Democratic elite are with Trump that they have done nothing, before the election or after, to counteract his rise to power. It will benefit them as much as the Republican elite. They will exploit it and leave the Democrats who actually believe in the cause behind, as they have always done. Power is more important than fairness or justice. And we can't expect the working class or the poor to rise up unless there is a gross injustice or economic collapse. Remember, the wealthy profit from economic collapse too. Every Wall Street crash has made someone richer. I would allow the state of Jefferson to form and secede from the Union, but only if what is left of California does the same. We could create a truce between them. Neither nation-state would have anything to gain from the other, and live independently of the federal government, have free democratic elections where every vote counts, where there are no parties and no single ruling entity like a governor, but a council made up of many voices. If the Democrats had been more bold, going back to Gore and Clinton and Obama, and of course Biden-Harris, they could have created a new status quo, made up of these disparate parts, but synthesized to seem like a whole, like a consensus. And they could have created the propaganda to sell this coalition to the masses. But they had enriched themselves, despite their protests and rhetoric, with the elements of the existing status quo, which is essentially Republican. The Democrats had a chance with Bernie Sanders. He presented a radically different vision, but was rejected by the so-called mainstream Democrats. Of course, today, mainstream Democrats have become losers and have no leverage whatsoever in the equation, mainly because of their timidity and betrayal of the loyalists who would have stood by them, who would have united behind them. That leaves a coup to be enacted by forces outside of the Democratic Party. And again, there is no organization that currently exists that is working towards that goal. Instead, the Republicans have amassed that large consensus by selling themselves as the overthrow of the status quo, even though we know in the end that will be proven a lie. But larger percentages of minorities and women have bought into it for now. Their betrayal, their regret will come later. You notice how quickly the Republicans have moved to shore up their agenda. Before the Democrats can even catch their breath, cabinet member names, policies announced months before they actually take office. That is the key. Don't give the dissenters a chance to voice their concerns. The Republicans spent time and money and propaganda to create sub-parties within the police and military and encourage the growth of paramilitary forces and militias. What did the Democrats do? They spent $1 billion on a failed presidential campaign. Trump's policies will fail on many levels, even be disastrous, whether it's immigration or climate or tariffs. But who is out there with a strong voice to counteract it? The Democrats have lost their credibility. Obama, the Clintons, Biden and Harris. Who believes anything they say? Are you going to follow them into the breach? Of course not. And all legitimate voices of dissent have been quashed, minimalized, relegated to the fringe. The end result is, it doesn't matter if Trump fails. There is no opposition to it or him. People say it was a fair election, but was it? Yes, people might have voted for Trump, seemingly without coercion, but was it? What would make people vote against their own best interests? Why do we assume that hypnotism and telepathy and drugs and biochemical weapons and mind control of all sorts, mysteriously insidious means, didn't play a role? Why are we suddenly so naive? By election night, the hypnotism was complete. The timing of the conditioning was perfect. People will accuse me of being paranoid, fanciful. But remember the constant barrage of "stop the steal," "the election was rigged." That mental assault didn't end on Election Day. That propaganda war continues even now. And to suggest that there is something amiss will leave you vulnerable to charges of subversion and worse. You will be prosecuted as an enemy of the state, or you'll just be made sick or die and disappear, and along with it, your protests. When you talk about these things, you are an enemy of not just the Republicans, but their partners, the Democrats, who support the lies and benefit from the lies. Their corruption and lies and betrayals to the people of the United States who counted on them was purposeful. They knew that Americans who believed in them, fought for them, would be betrayed by their lies and abandon them, and that's just what happened. Where are the heroes? Where are the JFKs and RFKs and MLKs and Malcolm X's? Oh yeah, that's right, they were murdered and replaced by neoliberal opportunists like Gore and Clinton and Biden and Obama and Harris and RFK Jr., men and women with no moral core or integrity. The setup was our entire history, and the punchline is today. Rather than round up the Cheneys and Bushes and punish them as the blatant war criminals they are, which I think the people would have applauded, the Democrats embraced them. The answer to the new right-wing fascism is not more neoliberal, slightly left-of-center, liberal-friendly corporatism, but radically revolutionary, violent left-wing action. We are past discussion or debate. Hypothetically, of course.